Hey there, it's Cynthia with the Dinner Fix, where I help answer the question, what's for dinner? Today I'm going to be making what I would call maybe a fancy dinner. Definitely a dinner that's nice enough to make for company, but that you should certainly make for yourself because when you see how much time it takes to make this, I think you're going to be surprised and hopefully be encouraged to make it at home. We're going to be making a chicken with a shallot cream sauce, some couscous, and some roasted butternut squash. So let me show you how to make it. First thing we're going to do is we're going to get started on our butternut squash. I have here about 2 pounds of butternut squash. Now you'll notice it's a little irregularly shaped, and that's because it's missing the top part. That's because I actually used half of this squash for a different use earlier this week. I made a vegetable soup with the other half, so I'm going to be using the other half for this dinner. Now, it does help illustrate how I kind of break squash up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my knife and I'm actually going to cut along the bottom here. And I do that just to provide a flat, stable surface so that I can then cut down the sides of this. And I'm going to try and do this as best I can because this squash still is a little oddly shaped. It's not perfectly round. A little bit of that neck was still left behind, but I'm just going to work my way around the squash, being really careful not to slice your fingers off in the process. It's okay if you miss a couple of pieces of the skin. You could always go back and clean that up. All right, so that looks pretty good. As you can see, this is pretty much cleaned up all around. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to slice this in half. I'm just going to run my knife down. There we go. And you'll see it's going to expose the seed part. And I'm just going to take a spoon and remove the seeds. Whoa. And make a mess in the process. Okay, so these are pretty cleaned up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, again, laying the cut side down for stability, I'm just going to kind of slice this into like 1 inch or 3/4 inch thick slices. It's okay if this last slice was a little wider because we can just kind of flip it over, break it down that way. And what I'm going to do, let me move a baking sheet in, is I'm just going to break this down further. And again, the size we're going for is about 1 inch to 3/4 inch thick on these, and we're just going to toss them onto a baking sheet. All right, so we've broken down our squash. I'm just kind of taking a look. I'm looking for some pieces that maybe are a little larger than the others, and then just kind of trimming those down again so that I can have these be as equal in size as possible. That looks pretty good. So we're going to, at this point, add a couple of ingredients. One, olive oil. So we're drizzling about 1.5 tablespoons of olive oil. We're going to season with some kosher salt, some fresh cracked black pepper. You definitely want to use fresh cracked black pepper for this. It really does make a difference. And then our final ingredient, we have here a couple of sprigs of thyme. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just remove the leaves. So what you do is I've got the leaf kind of part pointing up. You just kind of run your fingers down. That top part's always really tender, so it breaks right off. But yeah, see, it keeps breaking off. But the thicker, woodier parts, it's a lot easier to kind of just run your fingers down the length of it. And then this is going to go in our oven, and it's going to cook for about 20 to 30 minutes until the squash is tender. We're going to kind of give it a stir halfway between cooking. But that's really all there is to this first dish. So I'm just going to give this a toss. You could use like a spatula or something, but I find that your hands are often the best tool in the kitchen. So I'm just going to spread that out as best I can. And again, this is going into our oven. I have a timer here set for 10 minutes, and then in 10 minutes time we're just going to give those a stir. Moving on, so let's talk about our chicken. So this recipe calls for boneless chicken breasts with the skin on. Unfortunately, you don't always find chicken in the market like this. Usually when the skin is still on the breast, it also has the ribs attached, which is totally fine. You could do a couple of things. One, you can ask the butcher if he'll trim those ribs off for you, which is the easiest thing to do. The second thing you can do is what I like to do is I just purchase the chicken with the ribs on and then cut the breast off myself. So basically you have, right, kind of this giant, well, I know this is like a ginormous one. You have the breast. I cut off about a 6 to 8 ounce portion of it with the skin, and then this part that remains, I can do a couple of things with it. Definitely not throw it away. But this is the reason I like to debone them myself, is because I can use this to make stock. I can also just poach the chicken. There's still plenty of meat on this. And with that poached chicken, you can make soups, chicken noodle soup, a chicken vegetable soup. I have a recipe on my site for a chicken and lime soup that's really good that uses cooked chicken. You can also just make like chicken salad with it. All right, so with the chicken, we're gonna do a couple of things. One, we're going to kind of pat these dry. So I just have here a cutting board that I'd used to cut the chicken earlier. Just gonna dry those off a little bit as best I can. And then to that, we're gonna add some salt. You're gonna season this pretty liberally. Just kind of rub that on. All right. Then we're gonna add some fresh cracked pepper. Okay, and I have here a cast iron skillet that I've been warming for a good 10 minutes. I want this to be really hot, and I'm adding some canola oil because it's what I have on hand, but you could use vegetable oil for this. You definitely do not want to use olive oil for this because we're going to be waiting for this to smoke, and the thing with olive oil is once it kind of starts smoking, it really alters the flavor of olive oil and not in a good way. So it's just starting to smoke, and the oil is shimmering. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these chicken breasts and I'm going to place them skin side down. And that sizzle is exactly what you're looking for. That's how you know your cast iron is hot enough. Okay, and we're going to cook those for about 5 minutes, undisturbed. Do not touch them. We want to get a nice sear on that chicken. Now, if you're making this at home and you don't have a cast iron skillet, that's okay, but you're going to want to use definitely an oven-proof skillet that is oven safe up to 425 degrees, because we're going to be starting these breasts on the stove, but we're going to be finishing them in the oven. Meanwhile, I'm going to wash up my hands and we'll move on. All right, so it's been 5 minutes that this chicken's been cooking, so we're going to turn this over. And as you can see, that has crisped up beautifully. That's exactly what we're looking for. Nice, crisp skin, nice and golden. So we're going to go ahead and turn off the heat. And we're going to move our skillet into the oven. All right, so that chicken is going to cook for about 12 to 15 minutes until it reaches an internal temperature of 165 degrees. Now, you'll notice I pulled the squash out because we are seconds away at this point from the 10-minute mark. And we're just going to give this a stir. I know it doesn't look like much has happened yet. We need to give it some more time. There's a timer. All right. Oh, it smells so good already. Like, you just get that delicious scent from the thyme. All right, let's spread this out a little. You want to spread this out as best you can. If the squash is all bunched up in the center, what you end up doing is you end up steaming your squash. And that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for roast. All right, and that looks pretty good. So this is going to go back into the oven. And I'm actually going to I'm going to add 2 minutes to my timer. All right, so while our chicken and our squash cook, it's time to prepare our final dish, which is couscous. So if you're not familiar with couscous, it's not a grain. I guess it's something like closer to pasta. It's made from semolina flour. It's really popular in northern African cuisines. You see it a lot in like Moroccan cooking and Tunisian cooking, but it has made its way out west. Actually, let me show you what it looks like. So you're not just staring at my face talking about couscous. So this is what it looks like. As you can see, it looks like little grains, but again, it's not a grain. Now, most of the couscous that you're going to find in Western markets has already had some cooking done to it. It's been pre-steamed and dried, which means that it basically speeds up the cooking process, because otherwise it would be a little more complicated. But at any rate, let's get some chicken stock boiling. All right, so I have here a saucepan to which I'm going to add some chicken broth. This is a low sodium chicken broth that I'm using. I'm also going to add a little bit of salt. That's good. And we're going to bring this up to a boil. Now, once this comes up to a boil, we're going to stir our couscous in. Then we're going to cover it back up, take it off the heat, and it's just going to sit there. And that's pretty much it. I told you this was going to be easy. While we wait for that to come to a boil, and actually I'm going to move it to the back burner. All right. So I just got that over like a high heat, and I'm going to keep an eye on that while I kind of move on to the next part of our dish. All right, so the final component of this dish is a shallot and cream sauce. Now, you can't make shallot and cream sauce without shallots. Actually, if you're not familiar with shallots, this is what they look like. They are a bulb, kind of like a very, very mild onion. And they work really great in the sauce because they do and lend that kind of mild oniony flavor without overpowering the sauce or the really just simple flavors of the chicken itself. Now I'm just going to peel it. You peel it like you would an onion. It's just, again, smaller in size. And you chop it the same way you would an onion. Now, our couscous, before I get too far ahead of myself, this water is boiling. Well, not water, chicken broth is boiling. So we're going to just add our couscous at this point. I'm just going to give that a stir. We're going to clamp the lid back on this. We're going to turn it off, and I'm going to move it off the heat. And that's going to take about 10 minutes. So we're just going to leave that alone while the rest of our dish kind of comes together. So as I was starting to say for the sauce, you chop a shallot very much the same way you would an onion. So you're going to want to make these kind of horizontal incisions down the side of it, some vertical incisions, and just slice across. That looks pretty good. So we're going to add this to a saucepan. Along with a couple of other ingredients. So first ingredient, which I have them hiding over here. First ingredient is going to be some dry white wine, and I have here just a Chardonnay. And we're going to need about a 1/4 cup. We're going to add this here. And we're just going to bring this up to a boil, and we're going to let that reduce down. But before that, there is one more ingredient that we're going to add. We're going to need some lemon juice. This is going to add a really bright, delicious flavor to this sauce. A really nice tang. I'm looking for about 2.5 tablespoons. All right, so I don't want those seeds. I'm just going to run this kind of through my fingers. Try and catch those seeds as best I can, though the minute I said that one like fell through. Where'd you go? There you are. Yeah, I don't want to eat you. All right, so we're gonna increase the heat here, and we are going to just let this reduce down until there's only about a tablespoon left, and then I'm going to show you how to finish the sauce. Oh, that was the fastest 12 minutes ever. That's the timer. Let's check on our chicken and our squash. How gorgeous is that? All right, I'm gonna take, oh man, my stomach is starting to grumble. This chicken looks amazing. I wish you could smell like the wine and the lemon and the chicken and the squash and the thyme. Like, this is gonna be a thing of beauty, it really is. So again, we're looking for an internal temp of 165 degrees. We wanna test this in the fattest part of the breast. All right, and that's reading, I'm having to read upside down. I stuck this in upside down. That's reading 167. So we're feel those juices. So we're in good shape. Now I'm going to take a look at our squash. Now it should be, this doesn't look done. It should be a little more like brown and charred and roasted looking, but I am going to just try piercing it with a paring knife to get a sense of how much more time it needs. I can pierce this. I'm still getting a little bit of resistance, so I'm going to just stick this back into the oven. I'm going to play like musical chairs here. Actually, let me do this. Before I drop a cast iron skillet on my toe, which I've never done, but don't want there to be a first for that. I'm just going to move that over and out of my way for a second. Okay. All right, so I'm going to set a timer for like 5 more minutes, which is, I think, how much more time that's going to need. I'm going to move my chicken to a plate. So I'm moving this to a plate because if I keep it in that cast iron skillet, which is still really, really hot, it's going to continue to cook and I might end up overcooking my chicken, which is not what I want to do. Our couscous is looking pretty good at this point. The sauce is reducing. It's still got a little ways to go, and then there's 5 minutes, actually just under 4 minutes left on the timer for this butternut squash. So everything's kind of coming together really quickly. The absolute last thing you're going to need to do for this, actually I'm lying, it's not the absolute last thing, but we're putting the finishing touches on our dish at this point. Let's put it that way. I've got some parsley here that I'm just finely chopping. Actually, I would say mincing is more like it. I want it really finely chopped. This is going to get stirred into that couscous. So I want it to be really small pieces so I don't have these massive leaves in the couscous. Though, I mean, if you wanted to just do a coarse chop, you can certainly do that as well, if that's your preference. That looks pretty good. How hot is that? Okay. So as you can see, the couscous has absorbed all of the cooking liquid, which in this case was chicken broth. And you can't tell, but it's kind of puffed up. It's looking really like, not fluffy yet. I mean, it kind of is, but in a minute we're going to fluff it up, and then it's really going to look light and fluffy. So we're just adding that parsley in. That was about a tablespoon. And then I'm going to fluff this like you would fluff a rice. So I'm just going to kind of take my fork, being really careful because this is like really hot. Actually, why don't we do this? You know, sometimes life doesn't have to be as complicated as I make it. All right. maybe I should do this here so you can actually see what I'm doing. But really I'm just fluffing this up, getting that parsley incorporated in there. All right, and that is done. Completely done. I promise. We're not doing anything else. All right, so this is reduced considerably. As you can see, there's hardly any liquid left, about a tablespoonful worth. If you find that you reduce this down like too much, you can always add a little bit of wine, which is actually what I'm going to do. I think I let that go down a little too far. Yeah, so I just added a little bit more liquid. All right, so that looks good. We're gonna grab one more ingredient out of the fridge. I have here some heavy cream, and we're gonna add, if I can get this open, it's putting up a fight. I'm gonna add about 1.5 tablespoons. And I'm gonna bring this back up to a boil. I'm just gonna swirl that around. Oh, there goes our butternut squash. Let's check it again. It should be done by now. Yeah, that looks done. Perfect. So as you can see, or I know how it's done for a couple reasons. One, it's kind of shrunken and shriveled up in parts. It's picked up some color. I'm just going to give that a shake. You can see it's picked up some color on the underside there. So this squash is ready to be eaten. I've turned off the stove at this point. All right, our heavy cream has come to a simmer. Time for the absolute final last ingredient, which is going to be some butter. So I've turned the heat off, and this is really important. You want to do this off the heat, otherwise your sauce may break, which basically means like the fat solids in the water have separated, and then it ruins the sauce. Not that this was a hard sauce to make. I mean, you could certainly start over and make this again, and it's not going to take very long. As you saw, this maybe took 5 to 7 minutes. So at any rate, we've got some softened butter in there, and that's unsalted butter, and I'm just swirling this around. And actually, while I'm swirling that around, I'm going to add just a pinch of salt and then a few cracks of black pepper. And just continue to swirl. And that's it. It's done. All right, so let me just clear up some of this mess, and then I'm going to show you how to plate. All right, so plating and eating time, and I'm so excited. I really wish you guys could smell this because it smells amazing. So you're just going to have to make this at home. Sorry, don't know what else to tell you. So we're just going to scoop our butternut squash, which again had like 4 simple ingredients, 3 of which I wouldn't even count because you always have them in your pantry. Olive oil, salt, pepper, thyme was the other ingredient that we added there. Makes for really pretty color on your plate. So then we're going to add some of the couscous, which again, we just boiled some chicken broth, added the couscous, let it steam for like 10 minutes, stirred in some parsley, and that was it. So I'm just going to pile this kind of alongside. And of course you can plate this however you like. This is just how I like to do it. And then we have, of course, our chicken. So I'm going to take one of our breasts. I'm just going to nestle it on top. And then I'm going to take that delicious sauce, which again, it was some lemon juice, some wine, some shallots that we reduced down, added some salt, some pepper, some butter, and some heavy cream at the end to make this beautiful sauce. And then we're just going to kind of spoon this over it. I'm going to add a little more. Just kind of let that drizzle into the couscous because it's going to be amazing. And there you have it. Dinner is served. Shallot chicken, roasted butternut squash, and couscous. I don't know that it gets any prettier or simpler than that. So let's taste. I'm going to just try a little corner of the chicken here. All right. Here goes nothing. There's like an explosion of flavor going on in my mouth right now. Absolutely delicious. Let's try our squash. That actually needs a little bit of salt, if I'm being honest, which I need to be. Need just a little bit of salt, but otherwise beautifully flavored. Well, I don't imagine you want to watch me eat, so I'm gonna go gobble this up. I encourage you to make it at home. Thank you so much for watching. Please comment, subscribe. Let me know if you make this and what you think. And I'll see you next time. Enjoy.